So what is serverless? Well, it's a different way of thinking, right? It's about how we write code, right? It's a design pattern that we need to take into account to build applications as independent functions. We tend to want those to respond to events. We only want to be charged when we execute, not when it's running all the time. And they can scale, right? And they can scale automatically. And that's one of the huge benefits of serverless. And that's because you tend to develop in this design pattern so that functions are stateless. So what is it not? It doesn't mean removing servers. That's something that's really important. The servers are managed by a third party right up to about the container. It's also not no-ops. You still need to manage your code. You still need to manage your deployments. You want to make sure you don't impact your users when you make a change. Just as important as doing it any other way. You need to understand how to handle disasters, and disasters can be a whole range of different things. It doesn't take care of your security. Well, not really. It takes care of your security up to a certain point, but you still have to worry about the security of your application. It is simplicity, but it's not simple, right? As you start to build more and more on serverless technologies, you tend to find it takes just as long as doing it any other way. It's really fast to start, but it takes just as long. It doesn't mean stateless either, right? The state itself can lie outside the function. So when we talk about serverless, think about the function being stateless, but that state can be somewhere else, right? So, of course, there is no one way of doing serverless, and that is something that we're here to understand today.
Thank you. So Michael Jenkins, Chief Architect of Emergency Management Victoria. Just a quick intro to what we do at Emergency Management Victoria. Obviously, our focus is on keeping Victoria safe through natural disasters and other types of emergencies that can occur over the course of any given season, any given year. We have a high focus on fires and bushfires in particular. As a fairly small organisation, we do a lot of work through these much larger departments and agencies, but it means that we don't have a lot of staff in-house, and our funding is relatively limited, certainly compared to the bigger agencies. So we have to make our investment go a long way without compromising on the safety and the security and the quality of the systems that we deliver, which is generally quite a challenge. So we look to serverless specifically to remove a lot of the management of infrastructure that would typically be required in these major systems, but also to build systems that seamlessly scale up from 1 user to a million users and back down again, minimising our expenses during the times when the systems are needed, but also minimising the expenses during those other times when we don't need them. As you can imagine, emergency management is a very spiky sort of workload, if you like. Nothing's happening today. 30 minutes later, there could be, a major fire breakout, and suddenly you have 500,000 people who want information. So that spikiness of the workload means that we can't just run at 100% capacity all the time. It would cost a fortune and it'd be largely wasted. But we have to make sure that any system we introduce can quickly and effectively scale up to that million user level and then back down again quickly afterwards. We did our first production serverless system almost exactly 1 year ago when we released the new Vic Emergency website. Now the Vic Emergency website was replaced a previous version, a previous iteration of the site, which had a large number of server components. But what we did last year is we replaced all of that with, as much as possible, off-the-shelf, off the menu AWS components. So we threw away the database servers and used RDS. We threw away the web servers and used S3 and CloudFront. We threw away large chunks of this infrastructure that had to be designed, managed, maintained, patched, locked down, and tried to move as much as we could onto AWS native managed services. By and large, we've seen this as being not just a solution to reducing the management and operation effort for these systems, but also a way of dramatically increasing our flexibility with how we design and architect these solutions. We've been able to, with this type of serverless infrastructure, we've been able to try things at scale. rapidly retry or change their architecture, move from, for example, a queue to a stream to a what have you, very quickly and without having the legacy of infrastructure that needs to be maintained or adapted to each of these new architectural patterns. And that's been very, very powerful for us. The last thing I'll say about the serverless model is that a lot of people will look at this and say it's nothing new, and I'll agree with you. There's nothing new around a platform as a service. We've been doing this for many years now. What's new is having this flexibility of being able to draw on all of the services of Amazon without being cookie cut into an application that fits on this particular form of platform. We're effectively rolling a bespoke platform as a service using off-the-shelf services and yet being able to rely on the web scale design and tested performance of these components in this bespoke platform as a service. And that's been very powerful.
We're an IoT consulting company, and we are about to launch our first public-facing platform called Connector. We keep finding the same set of problems. We keep finding that that our customers are building hardware, and we help them with the manufacturing, and we help them with the software, and we help them with the design. And then they get to the point where they say, so what do we do with the data? Where do we store it? And so we build them a miniature platform for them to collect all their data, and at that point we look at what scale they're going to have, and they say, well, we might be 1,000 devices, we might be 100,000 devices. And when a customer says that to us, we look at serverless and say, you know what, this gives us the ability to scale from small to large, and once you've decided, then we'll look at it again. In almost every case, we've taken the serverless infrastructure out eventually and replaced it with EC2 style services. The most important thing to us is stability under load. We know how to build stable services. We've been doing it for 20 years between us. So it's not hard to build a single server that's stable. What's hard is to build a cluster of services that can support, you know, 1 million active devices at the same time, or 10 million active devices at the same time, and maintain stability across that. We do also, of course, auto-scale our infrastructure, and the one advantage that serverless has, well, that Lambda has over auto-scaling, is the time at which it auto-scales. It's a lot faster with serverless, with Lambda, than it is with EC2 instances. And it also tends to be sort of choppy, so it's a smooth transition with Lambda. You don't really notice how many servers are up and running, whereas with autoscale, it gets to a peak and then it responds slowly and increases the number of machines, and then, you know, an hour later it might scale down again. It's a lot smoother with Lambda. The only way, however, that we could make this happen in effectively a startup environment, which is what we are, is that we needed to outsource the DevOps component. There are not a lot of qualified DevOps resources in Australia, and all of our development and management is done in Australia. So we reached out to base2Services, and they provided us with effectively a scalable DevOps service. So while we're small, they're small. When we grow, they grow with us.
Aaron Walker, the Technology Director at base2Services. Serverless for us really is about building a sort of streamlined process for our customers. A big focus of what we do now for our customers is on, you know, how do they build and deploy applications, right? So how do they do that in a way that, you know, lets them focus on what they should be focusing on, which is building their apps, right? So serverless for us has really been an enabler technology so that we can focus on, we don't have to run EC2 instances to, you know, to do, you know, automation tasks. You know, we can kind of, you know, leverage the sort of serverless platform and serverless technology, and really, you know, in this instance, we're really talking about Lambda and API Gateway to kind of provide those capabilities where, you know, traditionally that would have been done, you know, we would have spun up a bunch of EC2 instances and run some automation jobs on those, and, you know, be it scheduled tasks and those kinds of things. So that was the obvious right thing that we would, you know, we started using you know, sort of Lambda like from the very beginning, and we were doing all sorts of crazy things, you know, running, you know, when Lambda was only in a single region, and, you know, all those kinds of things, just to kind of take advantage of that, that technology. But really serverless is more of an experience, right? So if you can create an experience as a developer, I commit code, and that code is running, right? So that's the experience that they're expecting, right? So if I don't necessarily have to think about scaling, I don't necessarily think about how much memory or how much CPU I'm consuming, then I can, you can do that. And that's a big thing that we're sort of really focusing on and sort of helping customers in that space. Right? So I think the approach is to take that approach where just try it, right? The barrier is so low, and you end up with, you might end up with 95% of your app fits brilliantly into serverless, and there might be the small piece where you have to build some integration into some more traditional model, and that's the hybrid application. I think is where the balance will be. There'll be obvious things. You're building APIs, you're building all of those things. It just makes sense to do that. And I guess that's I guess my view is right now is just attempt to solve the problem. Because you might find that even though it doesn't seem like the right fit, you might find a good solution out of that, and that's for me the kind of focus of that.